So for the past 6 months, I ran at least 2.5 hours of Zone 2 running per week to see how much my Zone 2 pace would improve, how much weight I would lose, and what other Zone 2 cardio benefits I might experience. So first of all, what is Zone 2? In case you don't already know, Zone 2 is a heart rate zone that is around 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate. It's a low level of intensity where you may be a tiny bit out of breath, but will still be able to comfortably hold a conversation. Zone 2 cardio is ideal for building your aerobic capacity, and in Zone 2, your body's primarily using fat for fuel, so it's also great for weight loss. And because Zone 2 cardio is so low intensity, there's also low injury risk, and the body can recover very quickly from Zone 2 training workouts. To find your Zone 2 heart rate, there's a few different formulas out there. Personally, I chose the Maffetone method, or the Math 180 formula. With this formula, you take 180 minus your age, and whatever number you get is your maximum aerobic heart rate, or the upper end of your Zone 2 heart rate range. So for example, if you're 35 years old, you take 180 minus 35 and you get 145. This means your maximum aerobic heart rate and the upper end of your Zone 2 heart rate range is about 145 beats per minute. I happen to have an Apple Watch 6 series, so I used my Apple Watch heart rate monitor to track heart rate. And there's actually an Apple Watch heart rate zones monitor as well, which shows exactly which zone I'm in while I'm working out. Although it's not perfectly accurate, I know that it's close, and either way, it has provided consistent measurements to gauge my progress. I started this year and this Zone 2 running challenge weighing around 215 pounds or just under 100 kilograms. Although I'm a bit on the taller side, I think that's a bit too heavy, especially considering my body doesn't currently have as much muscle as it once did. So I was looking forward to hopefully losing some weight. For the first few months of doing this consistent Zone 2 running, one of the things I struggled with was just how slow I had to run to stay in Zone 2 heart rate range. At that time, my average Zone 2 running pace was like 15 to 16 minutes per mile, which is just barely faster than walking. And at that time, I was working so hard to consciously hold myself back during my runs so that I'd stay in Zone 2 that it was actually a little mentally draining, to be honest. But I stuck to the program and I continued to make progress. But soon I began to struggle with foot pain in my right foot and issues with my left hamstring. First came the foot pain. Usually it would start to hit around halfway through my runs. I'd try my best to slightly adjust my running form and my foot strike, and usually that would help enough to where the pain wasn't that bad. But then usually at the end of my run, I would notice that my left hamstring felt odd. Not like in pain, but just out of whack. Specifically in that upper portion behind the knee joint. And I was a bit worried about this at first, but gradually these issues went away. For the following months, I continued to put in the work, doing at least 2.5 hours of Zone 2 running per week, and some runs felt pretty good, others maybe not as much. And here's a few lessons I learned throughout the process. 1. Running lots of Zone 2 miles in basketball shoes is not the best idea. You probably already know this, and I actually already knew this, but I didn't have running shoes at the beginning of the year, and it took me a while to finally get some actual running shoes again. It definitely felt better to run in actual running shoes. 2, make sure to incorporate some strides, maybe even some sprints at least once per week if you want to build or preserve top speed. For much of this 6-month time period, I was doing almost exclusively Zone 2 running. What happened because of this is my aerobic system was improving, my speed was not. In fact, I think my speed and fast twitch muscles were diminishing. It got to a point where I was starting to do 400-meter intervals again, and I'd run as hard as I could. I could barely finish a rep in 90 seconds. And for me, this was a significant drop in my speed compared to what I could do a few years back. Now that I'm regularly doing strides or sprints again, at least once a week, I'm starting to see my speed come back. And because of all the Zone 2 cardio that I've done and still do, my body is able to recover much better from the sprint and the stride workouts. 3. A combination of Zone 2 running and stretching afterwards is perfect for injury prevention. I mentioned that I had some foot and hamstring issues in the beginning of the challenge. The Zone 2 running allowed me to notice these issues at a low intensity, and then stretching after my runs would help me to solve the issues before they became serious injuries. 4. Strength train in addition to your Zone 2 running. Again, this is something I kind of already knew, and a lot of people have heard this before, but I wasn't consistently doing it for the first few months. And this was one reason why I had issues with my hamstring in the first place. I think my hamstring was just weak because I was not consistently strengthening it, and this led to a big muscle imbalance. Once I started incorporating Bulgarian split squats, step ups, glute bridges, and bodyweight squats, I noticed the hamstring issue went away. Soon it was the end of June, and I had now done 6 months of consistent Zone 2 training. I wanted to see if my Zone 2 running pace had improved, so I looked back at my average pace throughout January and February and compared it to my average pace in June. What I found is in January and February, my average Zone 2 running pace was about 15-16 minutes per mile, and in June, it was 13 to 14 minutes per mile. And what about heart rate? Currently, whenever I do my Zone 2 running, my heart rate usually stays in the mid-120s for most of the session. Back in January, my heart rate would usually climb into the 130s right from the start, and then I'd have to pull back so it didn't go too high. So this was a great improvement that practically proves that doing Zone 2 cardio consistently has made my heart more efficient. In terms of weight, I am now about 207 pounds, which is about 94 kilograms, which is a 7-pound or 3-kilogram drop from what I was at the beginning of this year. So overall, this last 6 months of Zone 2 running has been a success. And I hope my sharing this has been helpful to you and your Zone 2 running journey. If you feel like watching another one of my videos, you can check this one out right here. The YouTube algorithm has recommended that video specifically for you. And thank you so much for watching.